Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us as we gather together a group here of members of the Whitman School Marketing Department, faculty, as well as one of our advisory council experts to dive into COVID-19 and its effect on the retail sector. My name is Julie Niederhoff, and I am an associate professor of supply chain management at the Whitman School. I am pleased to serve as our moderator today in what is, I'm sure, going to be a really action-packed, interesting hour of discussion. We have three additional experts with us today who are prepared to share their insights and answer your questions. So we will have each of them present for a few minutes on what they're seeing with regard to the retail industry, and then immediately after that, we'll be taking your questions. So with me here, we have Ray Wimer, professor of retail practice, who teaches personal selling, perspectives on business and management, and retail courses. He brings a wealth of knowledge about the retail industry and has been quoted in major media outlets such as USA Today and the Washington Post and more. Also with us is Guiyang Xiong. He's an associate professor of marketing who researches digital marketing, innovation, and marketing's impact on shareholder value. His research has been published in premier journals, and he has a PhD in business from Emory University. Lizanne Kindler is a member of the Whitman Advisory Council and is Chief Executive Officer of Talbots, a multi-channel retailer of women's apparel, shoes, and accessories, owned by the private equity firm Sycamore Partners. Under her leadership, Talbots brand has experienced a remarkable renaissance and reclaimed its rightful place as an iconic American fashion brand. Ms. Kindler also serves as chairman of Coldwater Creek, another Sycamore Partners portfolio company. So thank you all for being with us. Please note that all of our participants today are muted in this webinar. So for those of you who are with us from home, when it's time to submit a question, please use the Q&A, the question and answer on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will see those questions and get to them. This webinar is being recorded, and we will caption it and post it on our social platforms within about a week. So before I toss to our panelists, I want us to just kind of each go through and talk a little bit about what we're seeing from our perspective, from our expertise and sort of perspective on this situation. So from mine, I'll start. I do supply chain. So supply chain questions like, why are we having trouble finding things? What kind of issues are supply chains facing right now? And what we know from the retail sector is that every part of the supply chain has been affected by different responses to the coronavirus challenge. So for example, from the supplier side, we know that some products are having trouble getting produced because of labor issues or other challenges in country. Lack of supplies for certain parts of the supply chain have limited the ability to produce and ship product. At the same time, a lot of our manufacturers are seeing orders getting shut down, canceled, stopped mid-production, retailers trying to cut their losses on products that are not going to be sold as expected. And so our manufacturers are seeing big upheavals in terms of what they're being asked to do. Depending on how that affects our manufacturers, we might see some of those manufacturers essentially go out of business, which might affect the ability for them to produce products into the next several years as we reconfigure the losses that this particular time period is having for those firms. From the customer side, obviously, most of us have been stuck at home for weeks and weeks, and we've been anxiously filling our carts online and buying what we can. And from the retail side, I'm sure we'll hear much more about this from Lizanne. We want to buy things online, and most of our stores, if they have that product online, first they have to make it available online, but then fulfilling those orders has been a big challenge. So if we don't have the product in the fulfillment center, but we have it sitting in a store and these stores are closed, it makes sense to try to ship the product from the store. But that has added an enormous amount of complexity to the order fulfillment side. It has also, interestingly, added an enormous amount of complexity to our third-party logistics providers who, instead of going to a single distribution center and picking up a truckload of outgoing orders, are now having to go to multiple retail locations and pick up smaller amounts of packages. And so we're seeing not only an increased pressure on our distribution companies like UPS and FedEx and the Postal Service, having more demand to deliver, but also having a much more complex network of things to pick up. Adding to that, on the distribution side, a very large percentage of our products that are shipped in the United States are shipped as cargo on passenger airlines. And as we know, passenger airlines have severely shut down. And so a lot of our air freight has been affected. So that distribution process of moving products around to fulfill those customer orders has also been severely impacted due to different parts of the coronavirus effect on our economic patterns. As we look at reopening, thinking about where those products are going to be, how we're going to get them positioned into the right location for our customers, keeping our employees safe, setting up our operations to keep our employees safe and our customers safe, and adjusting all of our operations to these new requirements for store hours, and the way that we interact with our customers and our products are all really complicated supply chain problems. So those are just a kind of an overview of some of the problems that we're expecting companies to be dealing with in the last few months and in the upcoming months. So definitely an interesting and challenging time to be in supply chain. But we're not the only ones in this problem set. So obviously, Ray, you're spending a lot of time thinking about this as well. So let's move to you. Ray, what is happening from your perspective in retail? Are we ever going to get to go to the mall again?
Well, thank you, Julie, for moderating today. And I want to thank Lizanne Kindler for taking time out of a really, really busy schedule and always being a great friend to Whitman, and probably most importantly, being a great mom to one of our fantastic Whitman students. So, three things about retail, what's happening, and some of you that are watching today may have seen the good news yesterday. That's retail sales for May jumped up 17.7%. Really, when we think retail, taking out gas and automotive sales, we saw that jump be 12.4%, which is much higher than anticipated, which is great. In particular, I know this probably makes Lizanne happy, is clothing jumped 188% in May in terms of sales, although it's still down from May 2019, about 63%. So we're really not back to where we were prior to the pandemic. Two reasons that's happening. One is phased reopenings. We've seen a lot more physical stores reopened across the US, and that's still continuing. So hopefully when we see June numbers, we'll see that as more stores come available. The trickier thing is a lot of that could be stimulus check spending. So that's really a one-time effect, a one-time bump we're going to see in terms of increased sales. The other interesting thing, and this may be a change in consumer behavior, is conversion rates. And conversion rates, if somebody walks into a retail store, they buy something while they're in the store. Many retailers are reporting they've seen an increase in conversion rates. Ideal would be 100%. That's usually not 100%, but consumers seem to be mission driven. If they're going to go out, wait in line to go into a store where it's socially distanced, that they are going to buy something when they're in the store. So that's another positive sign. So that's good news. The second one is maybe not as good news, but I really think it's a continuation of what's going on. Creative destruction is a term Joseph Schumpeter used to talk about industry being revolutionized or restructuring and kind of doing away with the old way an industry operating and creating new ways for an industry to operate. I really think this has been happening in retail since 2014, 2013. What the pandemic did, the lockdown did, accelerated that, put the gas pedal down and made these changes even more rapidly. So as an example, store closures, and this goes a little bit to Julie's question about the mall, some predictions are saying 25,000 stores are going to be closed this year. That's not a shock. It's just the rapid amount of store closures that are going to happen. So why is that happening? Is it because a change to digital? Well, from the 1980s till about 2010, store openings, so the amount of stores that opened in the United States outpaced population growth 4 times. So by 2015, every individual person in the United States had 23.5 square feet of retail store space available for them. So we were definitely overstored. So supply and demand, you have way too many stores, not all of them are going to be successful. So you would naturally see those closing down. But with the lockdown, the pandemic, et cetera, we've seen a lot of stores closing. So you see Macy's, even before this all started, was going to close about 100 stores this year. Nordstrom has come out during the pandemic, and especially when we were shut down, saying they're closing stores. Then you've seen accelerated problems because your revenue generation's gone. So JCPenney's filed for bankruptcy, J. Crew's filed for bankruptcy, Neiman Marcus has filed for bankruptcy. So that's a continuing trend. I thought probably JCPenney had another year or two, and all of a sudden it became another month before they filed for bankruptcy. So we see that. The other trend that's happening is consumer behavior switching. That's happened over time. But as you said, Julie, people filling up their shopping carts through e-commerce, and because you were not allowed to go to the store. So consumer behavior, how much of that change is going to continue? So the last point I want to make is this idea of e-commerce, omni-channel retail. So how can retailers best service the consumer, whether in an online or an in-store environment? In May, just go back, about 31% of retail sales happened in e-commerce. And I think, why is that number so low, right? If you think about like e-commerce is going to destroy retail, one of the things that aggravates me as a retail faculty member is reading news stories. And this highlight was back in May. Coronavirus finishes the retail reckoning that Amazon started. Yes, e-commerce is taking away physical business from stores, but most of your major retailers are having a website already, so it's not like it's destroying retail. It's just a new formation of retail. So thinking about Amazon in particular, eMarketer, as of May 2020, Amazon was doing 38% of all business in e-commerce in the US. That equates to about 5% of total retail. Lots of retail still happens in physical stores. What I think needs to happen, and it's accelerating now, how to best utilize your digital platforms with your store to make it the best experience for the consumer, making sure inventory is available. And as I wrap up, I want to throw something back to Julie, because you look at Zara saw 50% increase in May in e-commerce sales, but they saw a decline in 49% sales revenue overall. So e-commerce isn't the solution. There has to be some combination. But Zara did something interesting. They started moving their inventory between stores to distribution centers. So how easy, just to ask you quick, Julie, how easy is it for a company to utilize their supply chain to inventory manage much better?
Yeah, and I think Lizanne could probably speak to that better than I can in terms of actually doing it, but from a theoretical standpoint, it's really challenging. Omnichannel is a phrase that we hear a lot in business and specifically in supply chain, which is the idea of having every single product coded and in the same database so that it's not a matter of kind of taking data from one and putting it in the other. But in reality, many companies have completely separate data sets, and they don't really have a single source data of where things are and how to get them from place to place. So pulling things out of the store back to the distribution center, it's a great idea if your stores have to be closed and you're trying to fulfill orders. But we've also seen companies trying to fulfill directly from the stores, right? There's nobody in there. They can send 3 or 4 employees into that empty Kohl's or mall shop or whatever it is and fulfill those orders. But we're seeing that that's creating some shipping backlogs of getting things picked up. So while it is a somewhat effective solution, it's definitely comes with its own set of challenges in terms of allocating the responsibility and the ownership of those goods within and across different locations, and figuring out how all that transportation gets accounted for in a cost way. So, it's a big challenge, but you certainly don't want to miss a sale simply because it's not in the DC and it's sitting in a closed store. That's the worst case scenario. So how can we get that sale and still use our inventory effectively is a great question. I'm sure Lizanne will have something to add to that.
So you answered that beautifully, Julie. It really does go back to technical capabilities and coding of your inventory. And the direct fulfill from store is a much better and easier, faster answer if you have technical capabilities to do it. And then of course, in this situation where stores were shut down, you would have had to have someone to go into the store to be able to fulfill the order from the store. But if you were able to do that, you're in a better position today than the retailers that were not, because the ability to move the inventory has been critical.
Great, thank you. So speaking of clothing, shopping for clothing is definitely one of those experiences that we feel like we need to do in person, but not necessarily. So I want to hear next from Guiyang. Guiyang has done some really interesting research on virtual fitting rooms. And so maybe if we're not back in the store, we can figure out how to get our summer bathing suits and our next round of school supplies, school shopping done virtually. So Guiyang, you want to share some with us?
Sure, yeah, thanks, Julie. And let me share my screen. So I have some slides. All right, so in the past few months, many physical stores have closed because of COVID. Now some of the stores starting to reopen, but consumers may be still concerned about hygiene issues when going to the mall, especially when touching and trying products like clothing items, right? So as both Julie and Ray mentioned earlier, you know, the alternative option to shopping offline is to shop online, right? So which you can just do from home. So one of the biggest differences between online and offline shopping is online shopping is less experiential, right? So not try the product online. So what marketers are starting to do now is to apply the virtual reality technology to reduce the gap between online and offline shopping. And they believe it's the next big thing in retail. So we have seen firms using virtual rooms, virtual showrooms where you can just virtually try on products online. So this is one example of virtual firm used by Saks Fifth Avenue. As you can see, they have model photos on one side, and then on the other side, you can try the clothes on your own, you know, avatar. So theoretically, would virtual reality help increase sales? Maybe it would, because it can make the shopping experience more real, more enjoyable. So, and also reduce the uncertainty because consumers can have a better idea about how the clothes actually fit on themselves, right? But at the same time, maybe it would not. I'm not sure if when I share screen, you see only my slides or the videos as well. So I'm trying to move so on the other side, you know, maybe virtual reality may not help increase sales because it can reduce estimated image, right? So what does it mean by reducing estimated image? Let me elaborate on this a little more. So traditionally, what do online retailers do? They typically use very attractive model photos on their website, promotional photos, right? So to show the ideal look of the product. And consumers won't realize, you know, how the product actually looks like on themselves until they made the purchase and they received the product. And typically, it wouldn't look as good as in the promotional photos on the model, right? So they don't look horrible, you know, they're certainly not as stunning as portrayed in the promotional photos. So basically what virtual reality do, it prepones the timing of realizing the reality. So without virtual reality, you'll only see or imagine an ideal image before purchase. Don't realize realistic image until after purchase. But with virtual reality, you actually realize realistic image before purchase, which is often, many times, imperfect image, so it can affect your purchase decision. So because virtual reality can potentially have both positive and negative effects on the sales. So the online retailers are actually facing a conundrum, right? So they cannot decide whether or not they should adopt this technology. So in one of our recent studies, we examined the effect of virtual fitting room on sales. And in addition to sales, we also look at post-sales performances such as customer satisfaction and progress. So what we did is we did not only field experiments with real world data, but also lab experiment to try to figure out what's going on in consumers' mind that drive their reaction to virtual fitting room. So what did we found? So basically, one major finding is virtual fitting room can cause a significant increase in sales instead of decrease. So this can help alleviate some temptation of retailers to adopt this technology. But you have to be careful when you use this technology because it cannot help increase sales when traditional promotional photos are also made available. So basically means you should not use both model photos and virtual fitting room at the same time, but you should completely replace the traditional promotional photos with virtual fitting room. And why? Because there's a theory of self-discrepant theory, which predict that, you know, when consumers see their self-image in virtual fitting room and the ideal image in the promotional photos at the same time, they will feel a self-discrepancy. It's a negative emotion, and this is likely to you know, make them unhappy and unlikely to make the purchase. So as I said, in addition to sales, we examine post-sales performances as well, like satisfaction and product returns. So what we found is it doesn't not only benefit sales, but also post-sales outcomes, which is very nice because it's very challenging for retailers to find a tool to benefit both sales and post-sales outcomes, right? Typically, you know, a strategy would either benefit sales or post-sales outcomes, but not both, right? For example, traditional promotional model photos. It can help increase sales by luring customers to buy, but also hurt post-sales outcome because the product return rate will be higher, right? So, but in comparison, virtual reality, virtual fitting room can help increase both sales and sales outcome. So it seems to be a great strategy for retailers to consider, especially during COVID or after COVID. All right, so that's my part.
Really interesting. Thank you, Guiyang. So Lizanne, you have, I'm sure, a million different things that you're worried about as you look at your company. So maybe you could just summarize a few of the things that we didn't hit yet, or the ones that are at the top of your mind that are keeping you up at night as you look forward into the next months and years ahead here.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Thank you to everyone for having me participate in the panel. So just to give a little bit of context, retail has been my entire life and passion for the past 30 years. So I do spend a lot of nights thinking about what's happening in the world of retail today. So I thought about, my thinking is bucketed, I would say, in 3 ways in terms of how I process what's happening right now. So first of all, as an industry, everything's been turned upside down. It has been for a lot of industries, but certainly for retail, and in particular, if you're a retailer like Talbots that is very dependent on a brick and mortar base of stores across the country. So in the middle of March, when the pandemic hit hard and we shut down our stores, we really top of mind was survival. Let's think about how we're going to survive this moment in time. The second bucket that I started thinking about was, how do we engage our customer in this moment in time? Because where's her mind? How is she thinking? How is she going to engage with us? And then thirdly, quickly also started pivoting to the future. So I think I just touch on those 3 buckets. So in terms of survival, actually, Julie and Ray, you guys both spoke about this a little bit, but number 1, associate safety. We wanted to make sure that we took good care of our associates and that we were able to respond appropriately to make sure that they were not in any kind of danger from the COVID situation. Secondly, financials. We immediately, with 70% of our revenue not coming in, we shut down all of our cash payments, and it became about cash flow, which is interesting because in retail, we talk a lot about comp. We talk about our sales and our margin and our profit and our revenue, and it actually became all about cash flow model. And we went back out and started thinking about how do we talk to all of our partners in the industry. Julie, you talked about supply chain. Every day we have inventory coming in, we have to pay for that inventory. So how do we start to think about our financials and how do we draw out our financials? And I think when you hear about retail companies that are filing for bankruptcy, many of those companies are burdened by a lot of debt. There's a lot of debt in retail. And when you're burdened by a lot of debt and all of a sudden you have no cash coming in, you have to pay your principal, you have to pay your interest on your debt. And that does put a lot of financial strain on retail companies in particular. So, so managing your financials and really thinking about how you're paying all of your partners, paying your associates. We had to furlough. And with store shutdowns for a couple weeks, we were able to pay our associates. But past that, we were not able to pay associates and had to just put them on furlough. So very sad and very hard, but the cash management became about survival over time for the company. And then I would say inventory management was another one that we pivoted to very quickly. You guys all touched on that. And we had to figure out with 530 stores closing down, we had just delivered a brand new delivery into stores. We shut down our stores and there you are, dead inventory. So inventory for retailers it's your biggest asset, but it's also your biggest liability. And when it's not moving, I was imagining all these hangars with dusty inventory sitting in stores for a long time. But we were able to continue to sell online and really drive very nice volume online. And in 220 of our stores, we're able to bring a couple of associates in because we have technology that we could fulfill our orders from the back of the store. So that kept inventory going. And actually one of our stores up in Burlington, Vermont, they fulfilled so many orders, the store's empty. They have no inventory. So that's very positive. Now, the other balance of the stores have a lot of inventory. So inventory management is something that is heavily on our minds. Customer mindset became sort of the second bucket for us. What is the customer thinking about? How do we engage her online? We wanted to strike the right tone. It's a very serious moment. Customers got very nervous. We didn't want to be like, oh, we're so excited, we have another promotion. So how do you strike the right tone when you're talking to your customers in the middle of a pandemic? Where is her mindset? What is she thinking about? So I think transparency, communication, mindset, engagement with our customers was important. Our customers are very relationship oriented. They wanted to know, are your associates okay? What are you doing with your distribution center? When can I come back to your stores? So there was a lot of transparency and communication that took place, in particular in the early days. Then I would say we started really pivoting very quickly and continued to think about innovation and think about, just like Xiong was saying, that how do we think about the future? How do we think about the continued engagement with our customers? E-commerce is going to be a real factor, and our customers pivoted. All customers have pivoted in this pandemic because you couldn't really go to a store. But is that going to last, and what is that going to look like? We were able to implement curbside pickup, so everybody has had buy online, pick up in store, but she couldn't go into the stores, so we had to figure out how to do curbside pickup. We've always been very strong on trunk shows and events in our stores, and all of that came to a halt. So now we have to think about what's the virtual reality of some of those elements. Why is our customer coming to store? because she wants to engage with someone socially, because she wants to try on, because she wants to touch the product. So what does that look like in the future? And I think for the retailers that have been able to invest in technology and that have been able to engage their associates and their customers, I do think that this is a moment where there's going to be a separation. And if you have the ability to pivot and think innovatively about what you're going to be doing in retail, brick and mortar will still have a place to be for all of us. Customers will come back, they will be social. Now that poses a whole other set of operational challenges as we're opening, because you have to be socially distant and wear a mask and so forth. But stores has a place to be. How do you connect differently? How do you perhaps create a virtual experience in a store with a customer? So those are the types of innovations that keep me up at night, but excited about where we're going. And I think that this is a pivot moment for retail. I think we're going to have to really try to be innovative, but in an exciting way. So we have to make sure we survive financially. And we have to think about our customers and where they are. And then we have to pivot to the future.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. And for all of our attendees, again, feel free to put questions in the question and answer area. If you want to address it to a specific member of our panel, please just use our name and we'll make sure that person gets the question first. So Lizanne, I'm actually going to come back to you because Debbie asked, kind of going right off of what you just said, what kinds of things will you be doing What kinds of things will you be doing at Talbots brick and mortar stores to get customers back in store and be comfortable and safe in there? So what are, I'm sure some of the states that have already reopened have Talbots locations in them. So what kinds of things are you doing as an in-store adjustment?
It's a great question. And we actually have 90% of our stores will be open by the end of this week. There's a few strongholds in the Northeast that we can't open. But what we have done is, first of all, safety, communication with our customers on all the steps that we've taken to allow her to shop with social distance, mask wearing, cleaning. Customers are coming in, they're trying on product. We're airing it for 48 hours to make sure that we don't have any issues. So it's been a new way of operating stores, really. And the question is, how long is that going to last? Some customers are coming in there saying, I just want to hug you and I'm so happy to be back. And we're like, no, you can't, because we have to socially distance. So it's a challenge. It's really a challenge. But I think we have emailed, we have posted on our website, and we have included in our direct mail all of the steps that we have taken to ensure that our associates and our customers can shop in a safe environment. It's not easy, and some customers want to be safer, and some customers don't care at all. It's been different state by state because the state laws are different. So imagine being a national retailer and trying to keep up with every county and every state regulation around the rules and the guidelines. It's been a logistical puzzle, but I feel really confident that our customers are showing up. They're showing up at a much lower rate. It's going to take time, and truly, I believe that for the balance of this year, we're going to see suppressed traffic into stores.
Ray, do you have anything maybe that we'd add to that in terms of some best practices? I see another question from our attendees about other innovations that are being implemented in various kinds of retail environments, whether that's like a Sam's Club or a specialty shop. Any other innovations, Guiyang or Ray, that you've seen making a big impact now?
I think that the big thing, let's say last November, October, maybe 15% of the US population knew what BOPUS stood for, buy in store pickup, buy online pickup at store. And all of a sudden, the increase, I think awareness is about 80% now. And the idea of curbside pickup, but going back to Lizanne's earlier point, it's can the retailer have the technology and the capability in place to be able to execute that well? Because if you say you have it and you can't execute it, you're going to have a lot of disappointed customers. And another thing, I think that for those retailers that are financially challenged, like a JCPenney, you're worried about financial survival. You can't really invest a lot of money into these new areas to truly be innovative, to make people feel comfortable coming back, at least driving up outside the store. That said, being TJ Maxx or Marshall, I've driven past a TJ Maxx and a Marshall, and I've seen pictures online. The crowds waiting to get in that maybe weren't socially distant, waiting to get into the stores because they had to limit the capacity, so that there is physical brick and mortar. People want to go back into the store too.
Good, yeah. So, you know, thinking about that, people do want to go back into the store. People do want to go back to the mall, but there's something we've been hearing for years. And again, a question from the attendees. We've been hearing for years that, you know, the malls are slowly dying. We're hearing a lot of the big anchor stores of malls are filing for bankruptcy. How do you think, do you have anything to add on that about, you know, the sort of potential fear of the death of the mall and the shift more to suburban stores and the way consumers look for their stores?
I think the ongoing decline of malls, mall traffic is down. There's still about 100 to 150 malls that we probably do about 60 to 65% of all traffic, all sales. So there are strong malls still there. But if you look, and since our university is created in Central New York, you look around out in DeWitt, our kind of regional mall is almost non-existent. The Great Northern Mall is almost non-existent. So really what's happened, that explosive growth I talked about earlier, were in areas that were primed to service a suburban customer. And over time, maybe they weren't upkept, the population shifted. So it wasn't in a great location, and it's not like you can go build a new mall, no problem. So there will be, I would say, especially regional malls continue to decline with store closures going forward because of that. And it just may be a little accelerated now, but there will still be malls. There'll just be few of them into the future.
Yeah, so just to follow up with that, I don't believe the malls will die completely either. So as I said earlier, you know, so the entire difference between shopping in the mall and shopping home online is that you have experience, right? So how do you create a better experience for the consumers when they go to the mall? I think is the key for malls to survive, right? So when consumers go to the mall, they may, you know, they don't just make a purchase and go. If they can enjoy a whole experience, you know, dining, or let the kids play, or adding some entertainment factors, right? So that will make the mall a very experiential environment for the consumers to keep them alive. And also on the curbside pickup thing, so even the clothing retailers are becoming like providing drive-through like McDonald's now. So what McDonald's has been doing is using AI based on their data about what consumers previously ordered to predict what they will order when they come to the, before they come to the store. So when they're still on the way, because they have McDonald's app installed, they have their location, they knew that they will come. So, you know, so they can predict what they would order based on their behaviors. So, you know, so if the other retailers can do the same thing using AI to better predict demands, you know, this can help better fulfill consumer needs when they actually do curbside pickup for other kind of products as well.
And that actually, I think, leads to another question, sort of stemming off of one here from Lisa in the attendee list here, which is that a lot of our associates, Lizanne, I'm sure get paid based on a sales commission or based partly on how a sale is made. And we know one of the challenges with fulfilling online orders from stores is that sometimes a store manager doesn't want to lose the opportunity for an in-store sale to an online sale because they're not getting credited with that, having made that sale themselves. So how do you see this kind of shift to curbside pickup affecting the way that your associates are being compensated for sales and the store is being compensated for sales? What shifts do you see happening there?
Yeah, I would say it's a very good question, and something that we spend a lot of time on, but we like to think of it as aligning the interest of the individual associate with the interest of the company. And the interest of the company is to fulfill the sale and to make the customer happy. So, so we do actually, when we think about how we incentivize our associates in stores, we allow them to include any activity that they are fulfilling from a direct order into their comp. So, so they are pulling that way, because otherwise they would be less engaged to actually do what the company thinks is right to do for inventory and sales and keep the customers happy. So, so we do believe that associates in our stores should gain from being from helping us fulfill direct orders.
Yeah, I know that's a challenge that many stores have faced as they've moved to these hybrid models of figuring out how to account for that. So yeah. I'm sure every company has kind of a different balance and approach to using those numbers.
Exactly. Very different by company. Yeah.
So we have a lot of interesting questions here, and I'm trying to think about which ones to take a spin-off of, but I'm just curious, there's one here, you know, a lot of these companies we're talking about, including Talbots, are pretty well-established brands, but this issue is also affecting entrepreneurs who are maybe just now getting up and started. So what do you do for a small startup, an entrepreneur who's just entering this and now being faced with a market that's in complete upheaval? Any words of wisdom, Ray or Lizanne or Guiyang? Any?
I would say make sure that you can try to draw on some sort of credit line or a small business loan or Main Street loan to ensure your financials. The financials are going to be the critical factor. I think if you're in a startup mode right now, you have to maintain your innovation and your product position, but you've got to secure your financials. That's going to have to be the most important thing right now. And you know, if you had some sort of infusion of partnership, you know, hopefully that can go a long way. But there are facilities where in this moment you could get some financial help. And that's probably the number one. Clamp down on cash, don't spend. Which is opposite of what you would do as a startup, because you do have to spend to get going, but you need to make it through the year.
Yeah, thank you. So Guiyang, you mentioned that these virtual fitting rooms would help kind of reduce returns. And we know that an enormous amount of product that's bought online is returned. Something like 33% of online sales result in a return. And that's going to be really high on clothing items. So that's a great opportunity to cut into that. But Kuldeep asks, how is the pandemic affecting company policies on product returns and the handling of such items? Fashion retail is an industry that generally has a considerable amount of product return and resale. So could you speak to that maybe at Talbot specifically, and Ray and Guiyang, what you know about how companies have or will be handling that?
I'm happy to share that when we started reopening our stores, you're right, we have about a 32% return rate from our direct sales. And most of those, because we have stores across the country, those returns actually typically go to store. People don't send them back to our distribution center. So when we reopened our stores, we saw an influx of returns. So even though there was traffic, and I was saying, oh, there's 100 customers that showed up, but they all came with their returns. So that is something that we have to manage, but logistically at this moment in time, there were an additional factor because of COVID-19. We had to also make sure that we actually aired out those returns. So it wasn't typically you take a return and you put it right back into your inventory and you try to sell it. But in this situation, we had to let it sit to make sure that the inventory was okay to put back out for sale. So that was an extra complexity, I would say, in this moment. And then, Julie, you had mentioned because for the shippers, right now it's basically we're surpassing what would be Christmas time volume in the online channel. So what we're seeing is a slowdown of deliveries and shipments. So customers that are returning via shipping is seeing a massive delay in getting their packages to the retailers and their refund, their money back, which is a very frustrating customer experience. And the shippers don't have enough associates, and they also have to socially distance. So as they're sorting packages, it's in a different environment. So everything is taking more time. So it's returns are very tricky right now, unfortunately, but it'll even out, but it is tricky.
Good, yes, especially in clothing. Obviously, you have such an intimate experience of trying it on and deciding you don't like it. It's not like you just took it out of the box and said, oh, never mind. So that's certainly a complexity. I mean, return logistics are always complicated, but certainly worse now. But have you changed your policy at all in terms of offering a longer return time or a different?
Sorry, I should have said that. We did change our policy and we did allow for an extended return window. I mean, we have a return policy, but the reality is we honor our stores, our customers when they come in. So it's very rare we don't take a return, but we did officially extend the return window, knowing that our stores were closed and most of our returns go to stores.
So clothing stores have their own set of challenges. Grocery stores are a completely different type of challenge and customer experience all around. So a question from Danielle. Ray, can you elaborate on the impact of COVID on grocery retailers? What store format can we expect to be more popular in the future there?
Yeah, sure. So the impact, and I think, Julie, you talked a little bit about this at the top in your opening comments. The supply chain went haywire, at least for us, beginning of March, where everybody ran to the store to stock up. And we saw that for a little bit. So you would go and it'd be empty shelves because it put too much on the supply chain to get it there. And over time, we've seen it respond, and a little bit of the, I would think, binge shopping to stock up has stopped somewhat. Looking at grocery stores in particular, for grocery stores, what's been really great is some information that's come out. About 38% of consumers have switched to the Wegmans brand or store brand in the store, their private label offering, which is really good for the grocer because it gives them a competitive advantage. It's a little bit better for your pocketbook, and it's actually a little bit better for the grocer because of the margins they see on that. So we're seeing that, we're maybe seeing, and this behavior change long-term, is the amount that people realize that they can cook for themselves. So post-pandemic, lots of people were spending money out going to restaurants, and that really wasn't an option anymore. So all of a sudden we saw all these people learning how to cook again or re-experiencing their love for cooking. So that's really good for the grocery store. I don't know how long-term that will be as more and more restaurants open up, although it seems like there's going to be very limited seating in the restaurants as they do open up, so that's a good thing. I believe there was a second part of the question asking about store formats. What was interesting, even prior, Walmart and Target were trying smaller format, and you're going to say, well, they're not typically grocers, but Walmart is the biggest grocer, in more urban locations to try that out as more of a convenience option. We could see that continue. I don't know. I haven't seen any data on how well those have worked for them in smaller formats. We could also see a bigger increase where people don't want to go into the store. So you see much more curbside pickup in your even regional retailers, or more partnerships with online companies willing to deliver the groceries as well. I know that was taking off with Amazon pre this time.
Yeah, the Instacarts and things like that.
I was
Lizanne, did you have something to add?
that. I have found that to be, we were talking about buy online, curbside pickup. Instacart has become a household name in this moment as well for grocery shopping. So it's interesting. It's a different trend. Someone else is shopping on your behalf.
Another question here from Donnie regarding how retailers are working with their suppliers. So Lizanne specifically, or Ray in general, or Guiyang, do you believe that COVID has changed the art of selling between stores and their suppliers? Face-to-face interaction has been crucial in these situations, but Zoom and other virtual meetings are being leveraged more often due to social distancing. So do you see changes happening on that side as well?
So, so we have really evolved our relationship with our suppliers overseas. It's been very interesting because we are a design creative organization. Guiyang, you were showing about the virtual fitting. We have had to do virtual fittings with our suppliers overseas. We have a big design office in New York, and we typically fit our garments on fit models in New York with the design team and technical design. And that, of course, we had to disperse, and everything was done from home. So samples were sent to our technical designers at home. They would work on the pattern, and then they would go on virtually with the factories to try to figure out how to fit that. So we also typically travel to factories overseas. We quality control, we negotiate, we place orders, we look at fabrics, we touch fabrics. So we have had to really be innovative in terms of the creative process, and our relationships with our suppliers overseas has been very interesting. And some of the agents that we work with, Lian Feng is one of the major sourcing agents on apparel or in retail in general, and they were quite far along on the 3D fitting side of things. So that's that now. Ray, you were talking about how a lot of retail innovations have just been accelerated. So that whole process of 3D virtual fittings has actually completely accelerated. And I would say that there's probably a lot of our folks that are missing the tactile piece of it, but it certainly will change the way that we're working in the future, which is going to be very interesting.
Guiyang, you talked about the virtual fitting room as sort of a B2C, but it's interesting that that also can be very helpful for B2B. You're muted.
Yeah, exactly. It was very exciting to hear that it was used in B2B environment as well. Yeah, so I didn't think about it at all. So I believe in the future, if we have 4D, then you can even feel the texture remotely. So that will be even better.
Somehow start 3D printing the fabric. Very interesting. So again, kind of thinking through the process of working with your suppliers, you know, you mentioned already that cash is a super critical resource right now. So how do you go about contracting with our suppliers? What kind of maybe different terms are we seeing, or different negotiation options as we start to commit to production for next spring and next summer in this extremely uncertain and cash constrained environment?
Very good question. That has been incredibly complex. So first of all, cancels of inventory, liability, hold inventory, payment terms are the things that we have worked very closely with our suppliers on overseas. And the trickle down effect, it puts a lot of pressures on our suppliers overseas. but we have been able to work compromises along the way. I would say that what we're faced with now is that many of our suppliers, our factories overseas, India as an example, they had to shut down all their own factories because of COVID-19. So all of a sudden we were also faced with the goods that we actually wanted, we couldn't get. So it's a very complex situation, but I would say partnership, conversations, honesty around what it is we're trying to achieve. We all want to survive this. We want our partners to survive. And I think that is probably has been the biggest difference, I think, in this moment of how retailers are working. Some are just clamping down, saying, we're canceling, you're stuck with it, we don't want to pay you, you got to figure it out. And others are trying to create a compromise and a balance. But we certainly had to go out with some really, really big moves, and it's been tough. It's been really tough for the supply chain, for sure.
Yeah, and I think we can see just as recently as the 2008 recession, when a lot of manufacturers kind of cut orders and then small suppliers went out of business, and it was really hard to ramp back up without all those small suppliers. So we want to be careful not to accidentally limit our growth potential as we come back out of it.
And to your comment before, as we're starting to place orders heading into 2021, that's the next cycle of orders for us. How do you give an order if you also owe a lot of money? And so it's very complicated, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and we could ask a million more questions here, because I'm sure also for Talbots, you sell a lot of professional clothing and people are working at home. So how is that changing your demographics? And everybody's demographics are changing right now. Their needs are changing. It's a very complex time, but we only have a few minutes left. So I want to close with one more question, which is from Andrew. Overall, what are the biggest concerns facing retail? And so maybe we can kind of go around and each of us just give a 30-second, what do you think are the biggest challenges over the next 6 months or the next 2 years facing retail? So Ray, you want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. Biggest challenge is how consumer behavior's changed. How long is that going to change? So whether it's work from home, so you don't need dress wear anymore, or just comfortable clothing, or how accustomed do you get to just shopping online instead of going out to a physical store? And that's kind of a big unknown. How long are these behaviors that changed in the consumer going to last?
We all still need dress tops. None of us need dress bottoms anymore. I think we all.
So well, I would think so. This is a very uncertain time. It's very highly unpredictable. Like for us, we don't even know, what's the format of teaching in the fall. So it's kind of hard to forecast, when this COVID thing is gonna be over. But I guess the biggest uncertainty facing the retailers are the demand, right? So if this thing just gonna keep last for a longer amount of time, then after the consumers use up the $2,000 Trump check, then the demand be much lower. So I think the demand uncertainty is one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, I saw a piece today about how spending has been really high among lower wealth populations, but the people with the most money are not spending it because the rich tend to spend their money on travel and theater and restaurants, and those are all still closed. So it's interesting to see the spending patterns across different socioeconomic groups. Lizanne.
I echo the same concerns, consumer patterns, how long are they changing? But I would say that one of the things that is I find a challenge as we think about the future of retail. Innovation is critical, and innovation often requires funding. And I think that is going to be a big challenge because retailers in general are notorious for not investing enough in being innovative. And as we've invested through the years, it's a lot of investment, particularly technology, but also store upgrades, innovations, new looks of stores, registers in the store, so technology for stores. So it's a very heavy capital investment that's required to be innovative, and we're going to have to find ways, since we're not going to have that capital because demand's going to be low. We're not going to have the capital, so we're going to have to find ways to be innovative without the spend, and I think that's going to be one of our big challenges go forward.
Good. And I would say from a supply chain perspective, one of my big concerns is, as we've talked about, the effect on these manufacturers, because they're always trying to work 6 to 8 to 12 months in advance, and so the ability for them to stay afloat and continue to provide services, and what a shrinkage in that market might do to growth potential and recovery is something that I'm seeing not enough conversation around. So I'm worried about how that might play out as well. So thank you all for your time. We have a bunch of questions that we didn't get to, but we appreciate all of our attendees. We will be sending out an email to all of our attendees with the link to this once we have it available, and it will be posted on all of our social sites. So it should be coming out within the next week. So thank you again, Ray and Lizanne and Guiyang, and thank you, Tessa, for providing your services. And thank you for all of our attendees for your questions and your interest. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.